I would say the decision point once you get an inspiration is still human. Like we're making that call and that judgment call of whether we want it or not. So we use Kadem, an asset generation tool for 3D models. We use obviously Midjourney and Journey a lot when it comes to concept art and getting into a visual target. And then afterwards, once you make a decision, I think then there's sort of the execution phase.
If you look at some of the most fun you've ever had in games, like Halo 2 is one of my favorite games ever, but all of the Halo games, the COD games, recently Fortnite, but like, yeah, the memories you had in those games are fantastic, but almost all of the best experiences you ever had were most are tied to the people you were playing with.
Hey everyone, welcome to the 7th episode of allchat, a podcast where we're aiming to deliver an unfiltered view behind the scenes of some of the most interesting and current topics within the gaming industry, startups more broadly, and venture capital. Today we'll be diving into the topic of AI in games, first discussing how generative AI is reshaping how developers create the content which goes into making games, and second, discussing how AI-powered agents can reshape what and how we play and explore their applications beyond games. I'm excited to be joined by two founders building exciting companies at the intersection of AI and games. First, we have Rick Ling, co-founder of Rascal Games, a company building a co-op action-adventure game that is infinitely replayable with friends. Prior to Rascal, Rick founded a company called Blitz, which helped millions of players get better at games like League of Legends, and was acquired by Discord, where he spent over 4 years leading the core community's product team. Second, we have Nico Christie, co-founder of Altera, a company whose mission is to build digital human beings, starting with friends you can play games with. The core Altera founding team previously formed and ran a computational neuroscience lab at MIT where they were researching deep neural network models of the brain. And finally, there's Brian and myself, partners at Patron, a venture firm leading seed rounds across consumer and gaming startups. Now let's dive into our discussion about how AI is impacting the games industry.
Today, guys, really excited to have you all here. I think one of the biggest questions in the industry right now is what's happening around AI in games. And I think, between you, Nico and Rick, you guys are building something really exciting in different areas. Rick, you're specifically focused more on the studio side and content. And Nico, you're focused more on the agent side. But yeah, I'd love to get your just high-level take on today, where things are at, and what are some of the more interesting things that you've seen develop on the gaming front as it relates to AI.
Yeah, I'm curious, Rick, have you been thinking about bringing it into some of the gameplay over there?
Yeah, I think for us, obviously it's kind of twofold. We can think about the AI. There's AI side on the sort of helping us build the game, production, how do we build faster, and what are the new things that we can try in order to kind of speed up efficiency. And then there's AI in terms of like gameplay. We thought about it in a lot of different ways, I think. Some of the categories that we think about in terms of injecting AI is like personalization is one, which is like how do you make someone's gameplay experience truly unique, where the game and the world and the story actually responds to the player's output and then takes that into account in terms of their decision and choices. We have been exploring a lot sort of in that area in terms of like how do we make something truly unique for the players. We've also thought about immersion and richer stories, and I think this is where the AI agents really come into play. Like if you're going to build a world, an RPG world where players are stepping into a living world, like how do you make it actually feel like it's living, and do that in a way that's sustainable? It's something we've been playing around with. I would say we are, as a studio, for us at least specifically, we're building a multiplayer game, and so a lot of our focus so far has still been on the multiplayer aspect in terms of how players interact with each other, and less on the world generation side and less on the storytelling side. But eventually we'll get there. But those are some of the things that we've been thinking about.
I guess on the studio side, Rick, where do you think the tooling is today? Because, I think that's one area that a lot of people are really excited by is, hey, with the generative AI, in theory, you can cut a lot of costs, especially in the art pipeline and asset creation, which we all know that's just a huge chunk of game industry cost and just the cost of development. So are you seeing like the quality there is good enough where you can actually shortcut some of the more heavy cost things, or is it still pretty early where it is harder to use some of these services given the polish and the quality that you need on some of these assets?
Yeah, I think we haven't really used anything that we consider production ready, but we are in the prototyping phase. And I think one of the ways to think about some of these tools is that they're ultimately about inspiration explorers, which is like, great artists steal. And so, I want to see as many references as possible in terms of trying to get to a decision point of like, what do I want in my game? And so I think a lot of it is that the inspiration explorer side is greatly sped up. So we use things like Kadem quite frequently in sort of our prototyping process. Kadem is sort of an asset generation tool for 3D models. We use obviously Midjourney and Journey a lot when it comes to concept art and getting into a visual target that we want to sort of aim for and talk about. I would say the decision point once you get an inspiration is still human. Like we're making that call and that judgment call of whether we want it or not. And then afterwards, once you make a decision, I think then there's sort of the execution phase. And we haven't really gotten into the execution phase. We're in the prototyping phase, right? And so a lot of the execution phase about how do you speed up actually creating asset at scale and at production, I think it's still an open-ended question. Most of the 3D modeling tools and companies we've used are not remotely ready for production yet. There's just a lot of hand tuning involved. That's to make it actual production ready. But for the prototyping phase, it's been working really well and it actually speeds us up quite a bit. I would also sort of separate this, which is there's also things like Unreal 5's PCG and their new motion matching stuff that you can consider as part of AI, but like sort of the AI wave. But those are really robust tools that are extremely powerful. You can generate a world theoretically through Unreal 5's PCG system already. And so those things are, I think a lot of them are actually production ready. And so those are sort of a set of tools that we've been looking at as well.
How about you? How about you, Nico? Have you guys done anything on
There's
the?
like on the creation stuff, not so much. I think there's like a third bucket. Like Rick talked about a bit of the novelty aspect and then sort of the tooling infrastructure. The third one we're kind of attacking right now is if you look at some of the most fun you've ever had in games, like Halo 2 is one of my favorite games ever. But all of the Halo games, the COD games, like recently Fortnite. But like, yeah, the memories you had in those games are fantastic, but almost all of the best experiences you ever had were most are tied to the people you were playing with. And the experiences you had with them and the social aspect of gaming. So what we're trying to do, which is pretty tough, obviously, is create that co-player experience that you can play any game with. And if we can do that right, we think it's pretty compelling. In order to do so, you have to get a lot of the human qualities really down pat for that. And I think when we thought about what AI NPCs meant for the industry, I think if you reverse 2 years out, it seemed super compelling. Like, all right, if you can take all these, characters that are meant to advance the narrative in a game and you can make them conversationally intelligent and flexible, that would definitely be compelling. And what we found is it's certainly better than nothing, or in most cases it's better than nothing, but it's not transformative. And in fact, there are downsides. So for example, if you go to an NPC and you say, listen, we're going to go beat the hell out of the dragon, and it says, sure, let's do it. And then it can't actually do it because it's not capable of doing actions, right? Or it doesn't have agency. You just made the game worse. Like you just took away an experience. So what we're seeing is if you're going to have NPCs that are better, they have to not really be NPCs. Like you have to rethink a little bit of the game design, and you have to make sure that they're actually somewhat agentic, which then starts to make the narrative and the design choices that much harder. So that's how we've thought about that space so far.
Yeah, I'm curious on that point how gamers would adopt agents, right? Because I think again, like on the art side, certainly it could just be the vocal minority. But if you look on social media, there's been some pushback against like AI art. I wonder, like, I'm really curious to see, and I think it's going to really depend on the experiences, right? And to your point, if you create a bunch of robots that are literally just like slightly better than the NPCs we have today, I don't think that's it. It has to be a point where for some of these players, it's like a new type of experience. But I guess Rick, like you've worked at Discord, and you've certainly saw your share of not necessarily NPCs, but there's just a lot of bots and things that got created there that interacted with humans and had that social element. So, like, what's your perspective as it relates to the innovation that's happening in AI agents, and like, what do you think the reception would be from the market, and what's your kind of thoughts as it relates to specifically gamers?
I don't know if it's that transformational in terms of the new concept. Every single player RPG starts off with having NPC companions, and I think a lot of the technology that's been worked on right now is simply making them like better, right? And so like what does better mean, I think is something that's to be discovered, and like how do you design gameplay around having better NPCs. But like I don't think the concept itself of having companions within games that you sort of vicariously live through or you interact with is anything new for players. Like if you think about the wave of games like Genshin right now, they're all about playing through NPC characters, right? Those are characters that people fall in love with, they become super fans of, or they really want to spend a lot of money to get. Like those are things that like people have attachment towards, and getting attached to characters are something that like we as humans have been very used to doing. And so I don't necessarily think there's an adoption problem when it comes to AI agents and NPCs and companions. I think an adoption problem comes less of that concept, but more of like if someone wants to invent a new type of gameplay that really leverages this aspect, is that something that ends up being from a user experience perspective that people actually want to do? And so I think a good example of this is like there are some games that are trying in which like you actually have to physically type sentences to talk to the NPC, and I'm not sure that's something at the current moment in time from a user experience perspective is something people want to do, because ultimately we move from command line to GUIs for a reason. Like you click buttons because it's faster and it gets to what you want quicker. That said, if the output is transformatively better, which again, like maybe that is possible, and we'll get there one day, and I think that foreseeably is going to be true. Then like it's possible that like people are willing to put in more effort in terms of interacting with the companion itself in the first place, in order to get that better output. But I think you have to show that that's true for players to really want to do it. So you know, I think in general, I think the agent side is actually a less contentious topic, even among gamer audiences, and I think that's something they're very much used to, and they want better immersion, they want better characters, they want characters that actually respond to them and are tailored to them. But it's really the input, I think, right now that really needs a lot of work in terms of the user experience. But obviously, Nico, you guys have been working this for a while, so
No,
curious
but
to
I
hear what
think
you think.
you're like that's right, spot on. It's if you go at it from like an AI first perspective, the gamers tend to like throw up, and I don't think that's exclusive to gamers. It's like it's a creative thing. Like Apple just came out with that stupid ad where they squashed every creative instrument in the world into like an iPad, and like artists are tortured souls, and it pissed them off, and it's because they're passionate about what they're doing, and it was like a technology first thing. And what we found actually before our big demo for our agent that the Minecraft community loved, we actually had a pre-launch where we did something else and we called it a companion, and we really went about the AI first. And every single person was like, this is the end of the world. I hate this. What are you doing? And then what we found is when we made it more about like, look at all the fun stuff you can do in Minecraft now, that's when everybody was racing to like brag about it and talk about it and ask for access. And what we've done now is if you look at like our content and some of the stuff we share, it's all Minecraft. It's all user experience. It's all like, this is what's fun. And that's why they're okay with AI. If we came into it and it was AI first, I don't think gamers are ready for that, at least not for a while.
Yeah.
I think it's important to just look at like how have like agents and bots in games evolved over time. And I think a lot of whether it's single player or multiplayer games, the first version of it is like tutorial. It's like a guided experience that like teach you how to play a game or helps people like on ramp into a game. And then I think in a lot of multiplayer games, it was like either for cheating or for trying to like use like AI to create like a better performing players than actual human players. And you saw that with OpenAI, with Dota and a lot of the earlier kind of explorations there. And so I feel like in a lot of these cases, there was a very clear utility around like what the bot needed to do and like why it existed. And then maybe in the RPGs, it's more like to further along a narrative or to guide you along like this storyline. And so I think the low hanging fruit, which people are trying to tackle today, is like how do you just make some of those things like a little bit deeper than they were in that first use case, but that to Rick's point, like that doesn't necessarily bring anything new. And then like, do you actually want to talk to an NPC for like 10 minutes instead of 15 seconds in order to get them to do the next thing? Like, probably not in most cases. And so I really do think it's like important to take a step back and think about like what is the actual technology being used for, and is that actually something that people want to do?
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I mean, you guys probably saw the Copilot Minecraft integration and announced, right? But how they approach it is very interesting. It's almost like it's literally like Copilot, but for gamers, where they're just there to assist you. And I think why we got pretty excited about what you guys are doing, Nico, was I think like at least from our perspective, when it comes to games, like you do need that front end experience that's just very differentiated. That is like first principles. Like it should feel like you're using like Midjourney or GPT or character for like the first time, right? And it makes you want to come back, not because it is like AI, but there's some unique element that just wasn't possible before. And I guess like on that point, like how do you guys kind of think about some of these bigger players? Because obviously this is like a really exciting space. There's I'm sure from Microsoft to OpenAI, there's like folks that are thinking a lot about specifically even potentially even gaming, and maybe not, but
Yeah, it's if you asked us 3 months ago, like is where we're starting. I need a better word than orthogonal, but like different enough to what these big players are doing. And are you being very strategic about choosing that? We'd say, yeah, absolutely. There's no way OpenAI is going to get into gaming right now. And like it's a differentiated use case, and it takes advantage of a lot of the stuff we do better right out of the bat. And I think when we were beating that drum 3 months ago, 6 months ago, we started the company, people more often than not just didn't see the vision. And obviously you guys did. And what we started to see is people really starting to coalesce around that. And now people write us like, Of course you're starting in games. This makes perfect sense. And it's not just the investors and the early partners, it's also the big players. So, Suleiman shows the 4.0 demo and he uses Minecraft. OpenAI goes and they show social emotional intelligence, right, for the voice model. It's reassuring in that, like, yeah, we were here first and we're here early, but now it's also, we have like the titans who are circling and getting closer to our starting point. And it's made us a little bit reconsider, like, say these models do get better, how are we building a system, right? That's, if the models are like the CPU, right? Like, as those get better, how much better are we really getting? And for example, if those models get better, the most you can possibly charge, right? Or like an enterprise partner would pay for OpenAI is $20 a month, right? Or, and a year from now, they can charge more for a better model. But you can't possibly scale that further. You can't get 10 times better than that, right? Like, especially not per model. And what we've seen with some agent workflows is, yeah, you can make 3.5 competitive to 4 if you can like add in some reflection and planning. But how much better can you get and how far can you scale it? So what we're trying to build is, AGI is no longer the starting point, we don't think. I think 10 years ago when they set out for that, that was this far away thing. And now we debate whether it's been accomplished. And we think that there's something to be said about self-organized and collaborative intelligence that you're starting to see in agents, that it is, not orthogonal, but it's compounding on top of that. And that's ever more important as they start to get more and more into gaming and social emotional intelligence does.
Yeah, I've been both surprised, but I think it's a great sign for startups building in this space. Like, I actually thought folks like NetEase and Tencent and some of these like bigger players would come in and just like try to really innovate a lot in this space, right? And just like make heavy bets and have games out already. But it seems like, again, maybe because it is very different than how they've historically made games, or the games themselves just have to be fundamentally different for it to be really engaging. I guess, like, Rick, from your front, have you seen anything on the market side as it relates to studios and content that you feel like, wow, like this is like a truly differentiating product that's leveraging this technology, or is it still pretty early and no one's really cracked the nut as it relates to AI native games that just feel very different than what we've played before?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything major, I think, from the gameplay side that I thought was truly innovative in terms of like what we've seen in the past and what is possible now with the technology that we have available today. I will say, I think a lot of the larger studios, their biggest advantage is that they have the asset pipelines to really optimize and be more efficient on. And I think there's probably a lot of cost savings things that larger studios are doing that we're not seeing publicly, because the output is still the same. Like, the game is still the same at the end of the day, but it's massively cheaper in terms of how they operate and how they prototype. Right? Like, I think a lot of things with Unreal, for example, a lot of the data set with Unreal is proprietary in terms of like the game studios themselves will keep the code to themselves, and everything sort of posted publicly is just people who are learning Unreal. And so if you think about the data set that's being trained there in terms of using Copilot, or if you want to use a ChatGPT wrapper to help you program, like, those are things that I think larger studios with their own code base over the last 20 years can do a lot better in terms of helping their developers work faster. So I think larger studios in general, like, I bet almost all of them, and what we know, that a lot of them are using those tools internally in terms of speeding up their own production process. In terms of actually new games coming out, um, we haven't really seen a lot of them. I think there are some. I think there was an NetEase games that I saw that was using AI agents, maybe from InWorld, and trying to do that, but it didn't feel like it was a core part of gameplay. It looked like you just had another Paimon on the side telling you what to do over and over again that we've seen in the past, and it wasn't very exciting. But I bet they are prototyping new ideas. I think it will take time for that to be figured out. I don't think it'll be. My hunch over AI in games is that it will look more incremental than transformative, like, over time. And so things like visual novels, things like dating sims, social sims, I think those are the sort of the first games to really start making a big push, and then we'll see incrementally them get better over time in terms of like how immersive they are and what they're going to look like in terms of the player experience. I'm excited for people sort of prototyping more in that space. I think one of the ways to think about kind of this new set of technology is, like, games are ultimately about puzzles, about like how do you win, and having AI be a judge in terms of determining what the game rules are and what winning actually is defined by, I think can be pretty exciting. So things like negotiation games, things like, I don't know if you guys ever played Papers, Please, like that could be potentially an AI as a judge game. I think that's sort of an interesting space. I think there are some startups kind of prototyping that space. I think I saw a vampire game called Suck Up that was on Twitch. Again, the input is like you have to type, and I think that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so they have to sort of innovate there. But I think we're going to start to see more of those, and I think those will be quite exciting to see in the future.
I want to revisit. So, Rick, you mentioned earlier like the typing, and like you think about we moved away from MUDs into like graphical games a long time ago, and yet a lot of the if you look at this first wave of AI tools, a lot of it is like chat based, chatbot based. Character AI is like entirely like you're chatting like with these characters. Just want to get your guys' thoughts on kind of evolving away from using text-based input, because I'll say like that's probably the one biggest blocker for some of these things reaching younger audiences, because
Right.
I have kids that are probably slightly too young to be using a lot of these tools, but even teenagers today, like they don't necessarily type as much as they are kind of in these like 3D worlds, whether they grew up playing Minecraft and Roblox, role playing, etc. And so I'm just curious, like, what you guys think about kind of moving beyond like using typing as an interface
Right.
to something else.
Like I'll speak for us. Like it was another reason that Minecraft was so good is that typing is not necessarily like, it's done. It's not like the ideal
Sure.
method, but it's common, right? And that's how you use commands and cheats. So you get to do it here, and we've already built in voice, and I think that's important. But what is also super important for human to human communication is just the nonverbal stuff. Like when we've started to introduce vision, it's enabled a little bit of collaboration, and that's where I think this is going to have to get. Like when you're building something with a friend in Minecraft, oftentimes you're just doing actions, and you can actually be silent for some time. And I think that's like an underrated part of what the communication is going to have to be like for agents and for NPCs. Because when you play, even when you're playing some games that don't require too much sophisticated planning, like Fortnite or whatever, like you could go minutes at a time, and you're very coherently interacting with people, saying nothing. And I think that's a big unlock for us. And then doing the things that are native to games. So like, yeah, obviously, if you're going to do voice, like you should probably be in Discord if it's in a game, and that's where we've been going.
Yeah, I think for us, it's similar. I think we're building a game from the ground up, and so part of the consideration as part of the way we're building it is to log all actions, so that we can inherently have everything that players are doing ingested in, and then whatever our system, whether that's NPC Companions or the AI director that we're building, can then ingest that information and then make an output that then determines what's happening within the game. And so I do think there's a new world of building where logging becomes a lot more important, and the understanding of how do you convert sort of 3D actions and 3D spaces into something that the system can use becomes a lot more important. And so you kind of, with us, since we're building a game from the ground up, that's some of the stuff that we're considering from day one, in terms of the way we're architecting our systems, so that we can take advantage of some of these things that might come out later on that makes this process a lot better.
How do you guys think about defensibility in the space? I think that's like, again, even outside of games, right? When it comes to AI foundation models, that's like one of the contested topics in terms of like who's going to be the winner and how do you actually build a moat. Is there a technology advantage, right? But as it relates specific to games, like have you guys thought about that angle, and where do you land there as it relates to building around AI in games and actually creating moats?
Yeah, Rick, I'm curious your take here. I think you probably have I think games because games is a type of product, and those tend to be much more differentiated and have more brand loyalty. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it comes down to two things. I think one is IP still matters a lot. I think building love for characters in the world that you're building will fundamentally generally be defensible. And so part of it is like, can you build a new IP around these NPC companions if that ends up being a center part of the game? So that people actually fall in love with the characters that you're building or the world that you're building, they want to be part of it, and that becomes something that's defensible. I think the other part that becomes defensible for us, and where we're really focused on it, is less again on the technology aspect, but more actually on the multiplayer social aspect. Like we're ultimately building a game that I think can look like a social network, and I think there's something around network effects, and then identity building and sort of status accumulation that becomes defensible. Where this is the game in which you have an identity in a game where people actually care about you when you matter, and so that's where we look towards in terms of building defensibility. We're less thinking about defensibility from the technology aspect, because I generally think the reality is that like players don't care about the technology. Player cares about the user experience and the output and the gameplay that they're doing. And so we're very much focused on that aspect than it is just on the technology side.
Yeah, I would totally agree. For us, the way we look at it is our competitive advantage is like maybe a few months, 6-month technical moat for what we're doing, but that's the source of the product distribution and the stuff we can build that then becomes a source of retention and stuff that matters to people. So what we want to do is accelerate so that moat grows and is the source of continuous innovation. But for example, when we build, just like Rick said about like a potential social network, when we build friends, the goal is that you can't imagine not playing with your friends or losing your friends. And that's much more important to the people than it will be the fact that like our technical infrastructure allows for tools to move faster, right? Like,
how do you guys think about how AI impacts the ability to create UGC? So like one of the most popular games last year in China is Eggy Party, and
Yep.
they announced that like over 100 million maps have been made by players like over the course of the last like however 12 months. And I think like that was one of the main lock-in reasons why when larger competitors were launched, like, going after that audience, like they weren't able to actually pull players away from the game. So I'm curious like how you think about how you can use AI to contribute UGC as a way to potentially be a moat around products.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if AI changes it. Like, you don't need AI to build UGC. I think it just extends sort of the toolkits that players can use, and the ease it is to create content for other players. I think the whole sort of thing around UGC is around the fact that, like, to some extent, like, your players might know themselves and what they want better than the developer could. And so if you think about each microcosm of like micro communities of people who want to build for their specific niche segment of people, like empowering them to build those experiences and tailor fit those experiences for their people ends up helping you scale the amount of content you can produce as a company overall a lot better. I mean, Discord is a good example of this. Like, one of the beauty of Discord around the bot ecosystem is that we allow, the company allows people to build experiences tailor fit for the community that bot creator is from. And so there's a music community out there, that has sort of this music bot that logs the number of hours that people play as part of the way they run their community. And that's something that the platform will never do because they don't know like what exactly that community needs. And I think sort of the evolution of AI tools means that you just basically have more ways for people to really participate in the network. You don't have to know how to code. There are other interfaces that you can play with. You could say that like map makers are another sort of evolution of that, where there are building blocks that people can use to then go build maps that other people can interact with. But I don't necessarily think that it's like a transformational thing again. I think it looks a lot more incremental, and it depends on what game you're ultimately making and whether you actually need to use the latest technology for you to accomplish that, to let players be able to make and modify the game.
Yeah, I
yeah,
think it goes back to the defensibility question too, which is like I think that's one beauty of games, right? Is if you can actually create, maybe in the case of Altera, it's like memories, and then in case of you, Rick, it's like you create experiences or just again like things that is harder to lift from one game to the other, especially if you have some commitment. I mean, we've kind of seen this with League and some of these other popular games. Like there's just crazy lock-in once you spend. It's not even just like the money, but just the time to like learn like certain skills, all the way to like mastery. So, yeah. So sorry, Nico. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, but that's huge, and we think of memories similarly, but I hadn't thought of it specifically from UGC, which is interesting. I think if you look at like UGC, like the reason Minecraft is big, right? It's obviously an amazing game, but like it coincided with the rise of YouTube, and like everybody was sharing content. And if you think about why people share content, like at least personally, I think it's probably like two main reasons, and the third maybe being like utility. But like there's the most basic would be like it's the status signaling thing, right? Like you share something because you're in the Maldives, or like you want people to think you're cool or fun or successful. But the other one is that it's novel and that it's interesting. And then what you see was when a game is new, people share it. And like one of the things we saw was, if it's new and fun, at least, like when we gave early testers access, the most common question was can they stream it? And we're like, yeah, sure. Like make it clear it's an alpha, but yeah, sure, go for it. But people want to share things that are brand new. And maybe even some of that is tied to status signaling. And what we've seen is the ability to do UGC has gotten easier as technologies got better. I don't know if you guys are like ever recorded content like back in Call of Duty Modern Warfare, like 2007 or whatever. But like people were like streaming with like Blackmagic SIM cards, and like people were learning tech to create recordings because it was so hard to do. And now some of the AI startups are like making it so that you can instant cut podcasts into clips that do auto-generated captions and cut the most interesting parts of it. Like, I think that there's going to be a lot of like cool plays in that space that accelerate UGC. And I think from a games company perspective, in like if you're able to incorporate part of that natively in your game, it's just a great weapon for you. But like personally, we've been more so tapped into leaning into the fact that it's people do want to share this kind of stuff, and Minecraft is famously easy to record.
I think the other thing that a lot of people have talked a lot about more recently about just being able to create games and game generation is around again, like assume a lot of the AI tooling really just helps supercharge game developers, so you don't need as many people, like it cuts production costs. Do you think it is like one like net positive for the potential output? As in, do you think there's a lot of games like Pal World and Valheim, like they're not necessarily quote unquote historically like AAA, right? Like they required, I would say like less small teams, and now you're showing that you can actually create commercial hits with like a smaller team. And if you think about even some of these other indie games like Stardew, where it's like a solo game developer, like maybe the bull case is on the output. You're going to have more of these games because now it's a lot easier for smaller teams to be able to scale and build great experiences, maybe even build 3D stuff that they just weren't able to do in the past. On the flip side, I think now you're going to have too many games on the Steam store and the App Store, right? And that's already something that we're running into. Is just even without just the AI pushing this, there's just so many great things out there, and it's hard to find great titles. And you might actually see the other problem where you just have way too many games that people just don't care about. Like, where do you guys land? Just individually as relates to what do you think is like? What's your prediction as relates to the next like 5 to 10 years? Does the game industry in the end is it like a net positive effect, or do you think it just becomes in the ways of like we just have way too much content and it's tough to sift through, and now you have that problem?
I want to answer it from like and then like games and beyond games, and then I'm curious, but I think the question is what outcome happens, and then how important is it, or is it good or bad? But like it could be argued that less stuff gets done, right? Or that it's become so easy that fewer people do it, or whatever it is. And that tends to be like that tends to be the response to whenever new technology is introduced, right? Like, the cars got invented and now there's nobody to shovel and help take care of the horses, right? And like you argue that causes job loss, and over all of human history, the exact opposite has happened. So I would, I would assume that the same is going to happen in AI, and that everybody, it's going to be a little bit easier to make games, and the result is that more people make games and that there's more content. Now, is that bad or good? I think the result is it's probably net good, and what it does is also creates new needs and new businesses about search and discoverability and new platforms for distribution, and that those also arise and benefit. Now, the weird part is if you take this to the limit, and if you can actually build what we're trying to build, for example, like digital human beings, is that the end state product that actually finally replaces us all? Or is it just more of the same? Is it just always us being afraid of technology? And in fact, what will happen is that we'll all have the productivity of small countries, right? Is that the end state? And we tend to think that all of human history proves that that's going to be the case. But from a first principles approach, it's hard to imagine that eventually stuff doesn't get replaced.
Yeah, I think from more of a game player perspective, I'll go from that sort of angle. I think what democratizing in terms of like the ability to be able to make games, what it does in terms of having more games is that there are more niche games that can exist now, and they're easier to make, and micro communities of people who are interested in pirate games, people who are interested in games about ninjas specifically, games around like managing a merchant store like can now exist. And I think that's a net positive for the gaming ecosystem, where we don't have all our money sort of funneled into these massively large multiplayer games that like are sort of the same across the board. And now you can kind of tailor fit different types of content and personalize them for different types of interest across the world. And so I think it's net good. Like we're gonna have more games, but the reality is like more games, but not more games of the same type. There's going to be more games of different types now, and so you can serve different audiences that may not be served today. And so someone who really likes a specific genre of games that's not being developed today will then now have the tools to be able to go build that for their micro community and their micro ecosystem and start to develop that way. And it doesn't have to be something that a lot of people have to play, because it's much cheaper to make games now. And so I think that is a net positive overall as a game player, that you'll have more personalized things built for you, and the things that you care about, because like people can do that now.
And Rick, I'm curious, do you think that like the biggest games, like that becomes less of an avenue, or do they get even bigger?
I think one thing that's hard to beat is sort of the idea of playing games as a way to accumulate social status. And so part of it is that like the reason a lot of people want to play Fortnite is because where their friends are. And being good at Fortnite is also what makes you cool. And so I don't know if having more games will really change that. Like the way to gain status across the board, like most people will only want to spend time doing one thing. Like if I invested in 100 hours into getting good at Fortnite, wanting to switch to a different game is a really tough call, because I've sort of built up my reputation and my social status and my capabilities within that specific game. And so I think that will still be the predominant way of like the games that sort of dominate the market is the games that are able to capture substantial amount of people where their social self-worth and their attribution of what they're good at is sort of tied directly within the game. And so I think that doesn't really change that much. I think fundamentally we'll still have a few large games that dominate the market. But then I think what it does is that like the tail end of consumption across like what I do in my other free time where I'm not playing that game, where I'm just not a hardcore gamer and I play a lot of games across different types of genres, like those things will end up getting better over time. But I think the big multiplayer games are here to stay.
It's almost unrelated, but like because of the internet culture, we've all assimilated into like one giant monoculture, and these big games are they're big everywhere. I mean, there's regional differences between some like preferences, but like even I had someone come into my new house. I was moving across the country, and he was a recent father as well, and he's like, "Oh, of course we have the same crib and the same stroller and the same like we've all converged on like the same things that everyone has." And I don't think that AI is actually changing that much of that. I think I agree with Rick that the long tail spreads, but I just think as a result of the world shrinking as it gets larger, like the biggest games will also get bigger for that reason.
Yeah, I think also the definition of games is going to change too, right? The definition of gamers. I think like that's one thing that mobile did was it just really opened the market. Like pre-mobile, when you think about gaming, it's primarily like PC, hardcore, console. Like you've kind of had to grow up with it. But now, like post-mobile world with things like Candy Crush and just even a lot of consumer apps have some of these elements now, where I think it's onboarded more people. And I think if you extrapolate out like all the kids today and the teens, like just again talking even specifically in the US with the Roblox, where like that's kind of replaced for them. It's like their version of social network. Yeah, maybe there's like I think Sam Altman even talked about this, where he predicts that movies are going to look more like video games in the future, and then video games are going to look like completely something else, right? Maybe they're like simulation engines or things that are just even more far out there. But I think that's like the part that gets us pretty excited is this market creation, and like what does that evolution look like? And again, it's more of a timing thing. Is it like 5 to 10 years out? I think Jensen even predicted like you're going to be able to create a full game from scratch, right? In like a few years. I don't know how close we are to that reality, but it certainly feels like we're heading there. And yeah, that's something that we think about a lot. And I think Jason, we've talked about this too, where in a world where we have infinite output, is that like a good thing? Because it also feels like when it comes to, because we've worked at Riot, and for us, like Riot was like the opposite, where we've taken the approach of like, hey, it's actually the quality and the IP and the polish, and that's what matters, not necessarily as much as like having as much games out there. So it's almost like the extreme approach, but yeah.
Pre-gen AI tools, there's 10,000 games that are launched every year on Steam, and so it's like if that widens to like 50,000 or 100,000 or a million, like does that mean that the ones at the top are going to get bigger? I don't know, but it probably does mean that there's going to be, to Rick's point, like there's going to be more like deeper experiences at the tail where you can actually find like a niche within a niche that actually feels like something that like very specific people resonate with for like 5 hours, 10 hours, whatever that is. But in terms of like the 1,000-hour, 10,000-hour games, like
yeah, and again, like it economically makes sense to make those games now because they're much cheaper to make, and so you no longer need to serve 1 million people, bring a profit. Maybe you only need to serve 1,000 because it only cost you 10 hours to make that game in the first place. And so I don't know. I think that's a good thing. Like people can make things that they actually want, and the people that are similar to them can also get what they actually want. And so I am pretty excited about that future.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to think about is what happens in a world where people are actually, because there's so many efficiency around everything, now you have more free time, right? So you're not doing, for the average person, like the 40 hours a week, and you have more free time.
Yeah, so you play more games.
Because that's where what gaming competes with, is actually like time, if you think about it.
And we see that with like COVID, like people stopped commuting and people just started gaming, right? Like that was the result. And that's something we wrestle with a lot because, if you're creating agentic coworkers, like what happens to the workers? And I don't know if you guys saw that like video that came out like a week or two ago, but it was like the guy from the World Economic Forum, and they were asking him like what happens to these people. You guys know what I'm talking about?
I didn't see the video.
But he was basically like, yeah, I think video games and drugs, like that's what's going to happen. And it's such a dystopian view, but there's some fundamental truth to the video game aspect, at least. But then also we want the people who are building these systems to not wipe us out.
Work from home equals like more Steam and more leads.
Yeah.
Although it's been interesting to see. Like it feels like, I mean, just Roblox is an example, right? A lot of people wrote that off as like a COVID business. Like they basically said, hey, like this is going to go down the way of Peloton type of thing. But it looks like by all means, like numbers are up, and it's like they're just doing well, generally speaking. And game
Yeah, I
industry
mean,
has grown post COVID too, right? It's not like it's shrunk.
Right.
yeah, I think the Roblox flywheel worked pretty well because it also got more popular. More people then start creating experiences on it, and then there are references of what good experiences actually look like. And so then now suddenly over time, you sort of have a compounding effect of like even better and better games. And then coupled with the fact that like again, Roblox is more of a social network than a game. Really, the game are just activities that you can do with your friends, and then the social network side is like this is my identity and this is where my friends are and where I want to be. And so I think that also makes it a lot more resilient versus I think there are games in which once COVID ended, people started playing less because there was not a lot of huge attachment to it in terms of either social network or whatever that might be.
And I think that was a problem with Roblox, where because it's a social network, social platform first, and then games are the things that you do. The reality is, like during COVID, there's like an age cohort where 8 to 15 or 10 to 15, where you effectively had to be in Roblox, like during recess and for birthday parties and to do all these things. And when COVID ended, like that disappeared. So the kids obviously still go to Roblox and still play, just like a lot less time. They spend a lot less money, which is why the stock has been going down quite a bit. But I think like the kids that were outside of that age group that weren't forced onto Roblox during that time period, a lot of them just never got into Roblox because they continued using whatever, either playing in Minecraft or playing other games or just like seeing their friends in person. But I do think that that's a challenge for Roblox because they do need to figure out how to first get like the younger people to join now that there's no like artificial reason to have to be in Roblox. And then obviously the graduation effect has always been their biggest problem, where people were leaving to go play
Yeah.
Fortnite and League and other games.
That's some of the beauty. I think just specifically as because again, both Jason and I have two young girls, right? And I think that's another great use case for some of these agents is like digital friendship early versus like them having to play with like random strangers on the internet.
Yeah.
You actually have like bots that you can, again,
I'm all about Roblox
Yeah.
and Minecraft bot for
Right,
my
right.
daughter to play with, not random person masquerading as a.
So you guys would prefer
Yeah.
your kids playing with robots than other humans?
And then stranger.
100%.
I feel like
Yeah.
even the companies themselves do, right? I'm sure if you've talked to like,
Oh my God. So yeah, to that point,
some of
the
these
two
people.
most requested use cases from enterprises so far, one, and Jason, you hinted to it, was like this like onboarding agent.
Yeah.
I think it's just so obvious that if you can make that a little bit better, that it could be meaningful for companies at scale. But the second one is nobody wants their kids to play with creeps online. Like some of the biggest multiplayer game, like, I mean, Rick, we're loosely the same age. You played RuneScape growing up?
Yeah.
Yeah. How many of those guys were like pretending, were like 38-year-old men pretending to be 16-year-old girls? You know, like I would never let my kid do that. And I'd so much rather her grow up playing with very tightly guardrailed agents.
I think that goes to a bigger question of like, well, like go out 10 years, like digital humans. What does that look like? Is it just for like customer support and those kind of things, or is it actually just like something that's complementary to like a way to build healthy, productive social relationships as a person? And
I think we're already seeing some like hints at that this could be like an unlock for some areas, and it's still very early. But like you're seeing, like I was seeing some stuff about like an AI therapist, and that like humans still can't quite get over sharing some very intimate and private details that could make them feel badly, or whatever it is, or they're embarrassed about. And people have a much lower barrier there when they're sharing that information, knowing that it's an AI, and there's some real value there. I think the might have been the CEO of Bumble got like super roasted for like saying that she thinks the future of AI dating is that actually that like your AI will get to know somebody else's AI, and then you will sort of get through those barriers. But it's a similar concept, and I actually don't think it's that dystopian if it helps matchmaking. Like famously,
yeah,
digital dating is worse than it's ever been.
I mean, it's
I think
already
Black
like
Mirror
you go
episode.
back 15 years, like people thought just meeting people online would be weird, and now it's like the main way that most people meet. And so having the AIs like simplify and make that more efficient and have better matches is like seems like it
Right, and get over the pretension, right? And it could be a good thing, or it could be horrible.
Totally. Cool. Well, anything else we should chat about, guys? I think we're coming up on the hour.
Any spicy takes on AI tools that you guys have used or
Spicy takes. Rick, what do you got?
I don't know. I want a spicy takes to be public.
I guess like what AI tools do you guys play with outside of work? Just like experiment with and think is like fun use of time as like leisure.
That was a trick question by your investors.
Or I mean, what do you guys use primarily, like even just day to day? Like, what do you use it for?
Yeah, are you using Perplexity? Are you guys in that like Silicon Valley? I replaced Google with Perplexity.
I haven't made any threads about it. No. I mean, I play around with all of these. More so always from the framework of like how helpful is it to my work and the work stuff I'm doing. 4.0 has been like a pretty big improvement, and I still can't get it to write or do math properly for me. But like I'm writing some large memos or partnership agreements, and it's very good at critiquing. And then I just use the critiquing to like rewrite my stuff. And then from a fun perspective, still nothing quite in the game's place that I actively use enough to think that's fun. But every time, like I've used, that little Yachty walkout theme that got rebranded, and you were able to like bring snapshots on. Like I love playing with that. Suno, Udio. Like I think that's been some of the most magical stuff in the last 3 months to me.
For fun, I use the Photoshop AI generator tool a lot when it comes to making images for stuff, and so I make a lot of memes for work, and so that's been super powerful for us. And yeah, I mean, from a work perspective, like we're using like Copilot and ChatGPT on the daily. I'm a pretty bad engineer, and now I think I'm an okay engineer. And so I think a lot of it sort of that helps a lot. And then our art team uses a combination of like a lot of these modeling tools and also Midjourney, Crea, and Comfy UI to kind of like assist in terms of like production in the first place. And so that has been really powerful for us.
You know what's so backwards? You take it for granted, but people still feel weird about engineers using, large language models toolings. Like Robert, like my whole team is on it. Shu Ying, who's like the best developer I've ever worked with, is like on it, and she has a whole monitor dedicated towards it. But like, we'll have to like actively encourage interview candidates. Like, no, this is good. I promise, do it. And it's like a weird thing to have to filter for now that no one even thought about a year ago.
It's like people who refuse to use calculators. It's like, no, you gotta like write you can't use that.
It's like, or they'll be like, but I don't write JavaScript. I'm like, it's literally just translating it now.
Gotta keep riding my horse. There's no automobiles. Yeah.
I actually think engineering is probably the earliest job to be automated away. You don't need a lot of the low-level engineers anymore in terms of like building large-scale applications, because there's a right way to do something, generally speaking, when it comes to scaling infrastructure, when it comes to writing certain front-end code. And so I know a lot of blogs and tweets like to talk about art, and art being the first thing that goes, but I think a lot of it is actually going to be engineering. You're going to still need people thinking at sort of the higher level in terms of how to do something and like what they want to do and what actually matters. But do you really need 1,000 engineers to run LinkedIn feeds? I don't know anymore. And so it's something that I think people should bring into their toolkit so they become better engineers, as opposed to like thinking that they shouldn't interact with it and they should only do things on their own.
I'll even say one step further. I think it's already replaced like the junior devs.
Yeah.
The junior dev scene is brutal now. Even like the talented kids coming out of school 2 years out. Like the senior team just doesn't need the manual labor now that way.
Do you think it's just then like a lot of this stuff just goes to textbook? They have to like learn all the fundamentals at school, and then once they graduate, it's like straight to prompt engineering.
Yeah, that's not crazy. That's not crazy at all. And in fact, most of our like discussions and interviews are just system designs, and it's just architecting things. I think we're still years out though from like you don't need the hands to do it, but it's the first thing. Like I think art still requires good taste, and like that's not where we are with code. And Robert would shoot me for that because like architecture requires good taste too, but not so much of the heavy printing.
Yeah. I think one tip on writing is actually, I don't know if it's like a unique to 4.0, but if you can actually upload your style of writing and then basically tell it to, hey, make it sound exactly like me, right? Or based on my writing style. Like, and the output's been a lot better. Yeah.
I actually, my I guess a spicy, I'll spare her, but my sister's like a very well-known writer. So I'll frequently copy her writing and I'll shoot it in there.
So in this case, he doesn't want his own writing. He wants someone else's writing as himself.
She's way better than me, yes.